Okay, let's talk about a movie that absolutely defined the late 90s. Back in 1999, a film dropped that was so much more than your average teen drama. It was sharp, it was seductive, and just deliciously dark. Of course, I'm talking about Cruel Intentions, a cult classic that, believe it or not, we are still dissecting 25 years later.
And really, if you want to understand this movie's whole vibe, you just need this one line. I mean, I'm the Marcia effing Brady of the Upper East Side, and sometimes I want to kill myself. That single quote from Sarah Michelle Gellar's Catherine Mertiel, it just says it all. It perfectly captures that shocking, cynical tone. You've got this high society gloss mixed with this really raw psychological messiness. And back in 1999, that felt incredibly dangerous and totally different from anything else out there.
So, yeah, what was it that made this film such a huge cultural moment? Let's dive into the trends it was both a part of and a total rebellion against. Well, first off, it was a smash hit. I mean, look at this number. The movie was made for just over $10 million, which is pretty modest, right? But it went on to gross almost $76 million worldwide. That's a massive success. It was just proof that audiences were totally hungry for teen stories that had a much sharper, darker edge. And you have to remember the context here. The late 90s were kind of this golden age for taking classic literature and giving it a teen movie makeover. Cruel Intentions was absolutely part of that wave. But, and this is the key, it did not play by the same rules as everyone else. I mean, think about it. You had Clueless, which was a super charming take on Jane Austen's Emma. You had 10 Things I Hate About You, a brilliant version of Shakespeare. They were all fantastic, but they were, well, sweet. Cruel Intentions was something else entirely. It was way more risque. It didn't shy away from the darkness of its source material. It actually leaned right into it. And that, right there, is why it became such a cult classic. But here's the thing about that scandalous core of the movie. It wasn't some 90s invention. No way. The story is actually centuries old, which, honestly, might be the biggest surprise for a lot of fans. Yep, the film is based on this incredibly scandalous French novel from the 18th century called Les Liaisons Dangereuses, or Dangerous Liaisons. And the plot? It's all about these two aristocratic ex-lovers who get their kicks from using seduction to manipulate and just completely ruin other people. It's a game of power, betrayal, and psychological warfare, basically the perfect template for the movie we all know. And the genius of the movie was how it just lifted these character archetypes and dropped them right into the world of wealthy Manhattan prep school teens. The scheming Marquise de Martoul, she becomes Catherine. The predatory Vicomte de Valmont, that's our Sebastian. The French court gets swapped for the Upper East Side, but believe me, the cruel games they play felt just as potent, if not more so. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the fashion. Because in Cruel Intentions, the clothes weren't just clothes. They were weapons, they were symbols, they were a massive part of the storytelling. Let's start with Catherine. Her style was this incredible, seductive business wear. She's wearing these dark, powerful suits from designers like Dolce & Gabbana, but then she pairs them with these custom corsets. And that was such a brilliant nod to the really restrictive 18th century fashion from the original novel, except here it's totally flipped and reimagined as a symbol of her sexual power and control. And you can really see how the wardrobe just lays out the power dynamics for you. Catherine is in this dark, almost corporate villain attire. Then you have Annette, the good girl, and she's all about preppy pastels and buttoned-up shirts. And poor Cecile, the pawn in their game, is dressed in these almost childlike t-shirts. Their clothes literally tell you exactly who they are and what their role is before they even say a word. But maybe the single most perfect symbol in the entire film is an accessory. I'm talking about Catherine's crucifix necklace. Because, as we find out, it secretly holds her cocaine. I mean, come on. It's the ultimate visual for the movie's central theme, right? This pious, religious surface that's hiding some deep, dark corruption underneath. It's just genius. So how in the world did this all come together? Let's pull back the curtain and look at some of the key behind-the-scenes moments that turned what was a really risky script into absolute lightning in a bottle. First off, you have to remember, Sarah Michelle Gellar was at the absolute peak of her Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame. She was America's hero. Her own team thought playing the villainous Catherine was a career-ending move. But Gellar, she was so determined to shatter that nice girl image, she actively chased this role, literally finding out what parties the director was at and just showing up to convince him she was the one. That's dedication. Reese Witherspoon, on the other hand, was a much harder sell. She read the script and thought her character, Annette, was just too weak, too much of a doormat. So what did the director do? He and her then-boyfriend, Ryan Phillip, took her out to dinner, got her a little tipsy on wine, and literally got down on their knees and begged her to take the part. And it worked. But even better, she agreed on the condition that she could help rewrite the character to give her more of a backbone. And then there's that kiss. You know the one. The iconic kiss between Catherine and Cecile. Well, it included a totally unscripted moment, a little string of saliva as they pull apart. Apparently, someone on set pointed it out like it was a mistake to be fixed, but the director, Roger Kumble, insisted they keep it in. He thought that raw, authentic detail was beautiful. And honestly, it made the scene unforgettable. And you can't talk about this movie without talking about that final scene, perfectly set to the Verve's bittersweet symphony. Well, guess what? Licensing that one song cost them nearly $1 million. Think about that. That's almost 10% of the entire movie's budget, all for one song. It was a massive, massive gamble, but man, did it pay off. It created one of the most iconic endings in 90s cinema. All right, so let's get to the big question. How does this film actually hold up today? Because 25 years later, Cruel Intentions has this really complicated legacy. On one hand, it's a treasured piece of pop culture, but on the other, it's a deeply problematic time capsule. And yeah, there's no getting around it. When you watch this movie through a modern lens, some parts are genuinely uncomfortable to sit through. Sebastian's redemption arc feels way too easy and unearned. There's sexual coercion that's pretty much played for laughs. And the casual slut-shaming and homophobic language, it's just really outdated. These are things you just can't ignore today. And yet, probably the most fascinating part of the film's modern legacy is how we see Catherine. The conversation has totally shifted. Back then, she was just the evil villain. But now, people are asking a much more complex question. Is she just a villain? Or is she also a victim of a deeply patriarchal system? And this monologue right here is really the core of that whole argument. Catherine just lays out the impossible double standard she lives with. The world celebrates guys like Sebastian for their conquests, but it punishes her for the exact same behavior. Her cruelty, you start to realize, isn't just random evil. It's a reaction. It's what some critics now call righteous female rage. And honestly, this is exactly why the film endures. It works on these two totally different levels. On the surface, yeah, it's a deliciously trashy, endlessly quotable piece of pure 90s nostalgia. But if you dig a little deeper, it's this really complicated story that forces us to have these critical conversations about gender, about power, and about the media we love to consume. Which really leaves us with this one big final thought. Cruel Intentions is absolutely flawed. It's messy, and it is definitely a product of its time. But it's also smart. It's incredibly stylish, and it's culturally significant. So it forces us to ask ourselves a tough question about how we engage with art that is both iconic and problematic. Can we still treasure a masterpiece even when parts of it make us uncomfortable? I think that's a question worth chewing on.